what the work that the priest does, which is saying mass. That's the chief thing the priest does throughout the whole history of the church, and it's very explicitly back into in papacy of John Paul II. The priest exists to say mass. I want to say that is a masculine act, in the same way that like fighting to defend your country or like raising your children or providing for your family is like a masculine thing to do and act more pertaining to men than to women. Saying mass is that too.
Peace and blessings. Welcome back to another episode of Purposely Catholic, where we try to bring the Catholic lens and perspective, the truth and teaching of the Catholic Church to everyone, everywhere, every day, wherever you are. This is the podcast for you. Joining us on today's show is Matthew McKenna. Matthew is I don't know if we say PhD candidate anymore because you turned in your dissertation in theology at Ave Maria University. He studies and teaches on the works of St. Thomas Aquinas, G.K. Chesterton, and J.R.R. Tolkien. His dissertation in progress, which again now submitted, explains the link between, catch this, the masculine genius and the priesthood. Matthew, welcome to Purposely Catholic.
Thank you so much for having me on. I'm very excited to be here.
Yeah, we're excited to have you. A lot there. We just talked to Dale, I'm going to butcher his last name, Alquist.
Yeah.
On G.K. Chesterton. So this is God's providence we're following up with here. Matthew, you're coming to us from Florida. I got to just say I'm a little jealous because it's like -50 right now in Northwest India. It's terribly cold. And you're wearing a polo, bro. So it's just like...
It's a nice 70. You know, I was sweating earlier today, putting up some Christmas lights outside.
So I'm living vicariously through you here.
Meanwhile, I'm living vicariously through you. Haven't seen snow in years.
People say they like the snow. I don't know. It's something that I think people like just
on Christmas
something
Day.
You say Christmas Day and then you just take
let it melt away.
Yeah. You miss it when it's not there, but when it's there, you're like, oh my gosh, I want this to go away. I can't drive.
I love visiting my my in-laws. They live in Southern California. They live on the edge of the desert, right? So it's nice enough. In the summer, it gets really hot, but 45 minutes you're in the mountains and you hit the snow, and then an hour later, you're on the beach at the ocean. Like you just get it all. It's beautiful.
Yeah, my in-laws also live like Central California, between the mountain and the ocean. It's just a perfect area, perfect spot.
Oh, nice.
And Ave Maria, for those who don't know, it's in Florida. So for any Catholic parents there, like you want to get your kid to go to a real Catholic school, you can sell the Florida part. You know, it's like, hey, there's some that are in like North Dakota, there's some in Nebraska, but Ave Maria is in Florida. So that's an awesome selling point.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, great place for you to visit come winter break.
Yep. Everybody loves coming down here in the winter, not in the summer.
So you just submitted your dissertation. Was it approved, accepted? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So like the final thing we have to do is defend it, which it's basically 2 hours of Q&A about it. You give a little summary. These defenses are public, and then the members of your board, who are 3 or 4 professors who have overseen the project and everything, guide you along the way. Then they basically grill you on it, ask you questions about it, give you objections, and you have to defend it for 1 to 2 hours. I did. And then at the end of that, if you pass, then you become a doctor and you're done. And so I did that about 2 weeks ago now. So it's over in a way.
Congratulations.
Oh, thank you so much.
So how did you land on masculine genius and the priesthood?
Well, I've always been interested in questions of masculinity. Wasn't mean to make me a man ever since I was back in high school. We were just talking before we started about John Eldridge's book, Wild at Heart. Like back in high school, I read that and just was like hooked on this topic and read as much as I could about it. And so then went to grad school. I knew I wanted to study like a theology of masculinity, and kind of the natural way to almost like justify doing that theologically, a part of theology where this actually comes to the foreground and becomes necessary to talk about is, the priesthood, because only men can be priests, not women. And this is, of course, very controversial. And there was huge debates about this in the 20th century. And John Paul, of course, gave a definitive teaching about this in the 90s. And nobody cared, basically. And so even like, it seems like we're always talking about, maybe women can become deacons. It seems like we're still always talking about it, even though it's supposed to be over. So it's a very important topic and the kind of natural place to talk about masculinity in theology.
Mm-hmm. What has your experience been with when you share this topic with priests? Because we get a lot of criticism from our Protestant brothers and sisters that I've heard on TikTok and YouTube that most Catholic priests aren't masculine. Like, they don't know what it's like to be a father. They don't know what it's like to get out there and actually go work and use their hands.
Yeah.
And we get a lot of pushback on like what a father, our spiritual fathers are meant to be. How has the reception been to some of the priests when you ran this topic by
Yeah, there
them?
was a Protestant pastor that went viral.
What's his name? Mark Driscoll?
Mark Driscoll, which he's got some nice, like, there's some stuff that I enjoy that he says, insightful. But on the point that Bobby's asking here, he went on a little clip in the middle of a sermon. How am I going to, have you seen this, Matthew?
I have not, no. I'm not on the internet very much.
Yeah, I mean, you're in the books trying to get a dissertation together, so it makes sense. But he went on this whole tirade about, I'm not going to follow a guy who's not married, who doesn't have kids, etc.
Jesus.
So exactly, that's what we're saying.
That's what we said. Yeah,
Jesus much. So yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
So yeah, kind of like my main thesis at the end of the day is what the work that the priest does, which is to say saying mass. That's the chief thing the priest does throughout the whole history of the church, and it's very explicitly in Vatican II and Papacy of John Paul II. The priest exists to say mass. I want to say that is a masculine act, in the same way that like fighting to defend your country or like raising your children or providing for your family is like a masculine thing to do and act more pertaining to men than to women. Saying mass is that too. And so I want to be able to say, and I think I successfully argued, that the work of the priest is very masculine work. And so a lot of times priests, like the idea we have of priesthood is very like a neutered a person because they're celibates. And so we tend to think they're basically cutting off their manhood and giving away and no longer exercising this part of themselves. And if priests are taught that and think that way, then they end up being very not masculine at all. But I want to say the opposite. No, what the work the priest does, the office of the priesthood, is a very masculine office and role. The work they do is very masculine. And so they should be confident in their masculinity. They should understand that what they're doing is a manly thing when they go celebrate mass on behalf of the rest of us. And so then a lot of priests, I haven't talked to like a ton of priests about this yet because I was like keeping it all close to my chest until I defended it all. The priests I have talked to have been very inspired and moved by it and have loved it. And they've all basically been like, we got to give this every seminary never, especially in their formation, so they can start approaching the priesthood, the role they're going to be in through a masculine lens in a manly way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you have the rare priests who actually are chaplains who go out in the middle of battlefields just to say the mass. We see like Father Capodanno or Father Capuan, these famous Catholic priests who actually show what it's like why it's so important to actually be out there in a battlefield and bring Jesus to those who are closest on the door of death. A lot of times, and you see those videos of bombs blowing up, and there they are elevating the host. There's nothing more masculine to me than seeing those images.
Oh yeah, sure. Those are awesome.
So what were you trying to accomplish with this dissertation? Was it to push back this argument about women specifically, or what was your definition of what masculine means? Because even the term itself, we see the toxic prefix that comes to it, that it's totally upside down versus the idea of what a biblical masculinity looks like.
Yeah. So basically what I was doing is trying, like, in a way, part of it is like the apologetic show why women can't be priests, but it's really more, it's not so much that. I was really trying to understand why it's good, like the fittingness of having only male priests. And so the way I went about that was basically to look back in the Catholic tradition about ideas of masculinity, ideas of what a man was as opposed to a woman, right? Not just man-human, but man-male, as opposed to human-female was. And then like the particular traits and characteristics that men tend to have, and this is also supplied to us in modern psychology very well. And then also, as controversial as this is, look at what the tradition of the church has said about a division of roles between men and women. What's like a man's role in family and society than what's a woman's role in society. And that's highly controversial, but like even John Paul II very strongly and commonly, frequently affirmed this actually. So he's kind of like the defense for calling me a sexist. Because John Paul II thought this stuff too. So basically what I did is I went back through the whole tradition of the church fathers, a lot of Aquinas, the magisterial teachings over the last 150 years, especially John Paul II, and kind of just extracted what they were all saying, put it all together, was able to offer and discover in it almost constant agreements on the fundamentals everywhere, from the church fathers, Augustine, Chrysostom, Jerome, all of them, of course, interpreting St. Paul and Genesis chiefly, but then also in the medievalists, Bonaventure, Thomas, in modern magisterium over the last 150 years, everybody at length and very explicitly agrees on the fundamentals about like the man's traits, the man's unique responsibilities, and their distinct role in the family and in society.
What are some of those things? Because the way that opponents to this want to frame it is you're almost belittling or looking down on women. You're elevating men.
Yeah.
Only men can. There's this exclusivism that takes place, and that's not what we're saying.
Yeah.
So could you share maybe what are some of those traits that you've discovered, explored, that are particular to men in relation to priesthood?
Yeah. So of course, like Chesterton defines a feminist as the one who hates the feminine characteristics the most. That's in What's Wrong with the World. And it's funny because like you started by saying like, oh yeah, the opponents will say you're demeaning women. Only if you think it's noticing the differences between men and women is only demeaning toward one sex if you have some kind of bias in favor of the one. Noticing a division of roles between what men and women ordinarily, for the most part, do is only demeaning to one if you think one of those roles is meaningless and the other one's really important. And so, like, the first thing would be you to say, like, men and women are, of course, equally human, equally persons, and equally made in the image of God. And both their distinctive gifts and talents and vocations, to use John Paul's terms, are equally important and equally like necessary. Society without women is just as screwed as society without men. And usually, when one sex goes astray, the other sex usually goes astray as well. But within like the Catholic tradition, from the fathers interpreting Scripture, Aquinas interpreting Scripture, the Magisterium interpreting Scripture, it's very clear. Like, male is the head of the family. This is just the terminology from St. Paul, not just Ephesians 5, but also Colossians 3, and then also 1 Corinthians 11 and 14, and then also 1 Peter 3. So it's all over the New Testament in the letters. And then when they discuss what this means, they say it means a couple things. First, of course, the husband, as in his role as father and head of the family, has to lead the family well. That's, of course, leading not for his own aggrandizement, but leading is the service. And of course, this is just Christian servant leadership, like what Christ says. Now, in the world, and Christ is pretty clear about this, the leaders of the world lord it over those they rule, but it must not be so among you. And so the idea of servant leadership is a uniquely Christian idea. Like, that's the new thing Christ brings to the idea of leadership. He doesn't destroy hierarchy, where he says the whole point of hierarchy is to serve the lower ones. Hierarchy, having some people with authority over others, is not for the sake of those on top. Exactly the opposite. It's for the sake of those on bottom. If the man and his husband is supposed to lead a family, that means he's supposed to lead a family for the sake of those he leads. And then other things fall into that, like the typical protect and providing roles as well.
The thing I would just wish people would understand when we do talk about the role of the priesthood, for instance, or the distinction in the roles between men and women, always and forever, there's this emphasis on equality and dignity, right? Men and women are created in this dignity that they both share in because they're made in God's image and likeness, right? There's something in us that reflects God, our creator. Equal in dignity, but we're different by design.
Yep.
And to say that we aren't is to go against God's plans for us.
Yeah.
So that's all we're saying when we do talk about this distinction in role.
Yep.
Right? Equal in dignity, different by design. And if we can lean into God's designs for us, it's better, not just for us, but for those around us and for the world that we inhabit, right? Small world, lowercase w, right? Whether it's your family, your community, right? Your neighborhood, except like outwards, right? And upward.
Yeah.
So it's something to keep in mind here. And the thing that you said that really resonates with me, Matthew, the man is meant to, the husband, father, lead his wife and his children, right? Lead his family. Couldn't we say then God's plans for his family, right? If we're all brothers and sisters in Christ, is that father leads as well.
Yep.
So for those who are critical of this idea of a male priesthood, why a male priesthood? Well, the spiritual family simply reflects the family that we experience, right? Mother, father, children, etc.
Yep. Yeah, because like the church is the church is both like a family. It's God's family. We're all adopted brothers, adopted sons. So we're all brothers and sisters in Christ, adopted sons of the Father. But then the church is also like a society, right? It's the people of God. Of course, church just means ecclesia, just means assembly. So the church is also both like a political reality and a familial reality. So we have like coming from Aristotle, and then Thomas totally affirms this, and the church also does too. In the modern magisterium, there's two levels, so to speak, of natural human society. There's the family, or the oikos, and this is, of course, the fundamental unit of society, not the individual. The church in the Catechism is still very clear that the individual is not the fundamental unit of society; it's the family, the oikos in Greek. But then there's also the state, the polis, the city, and both those are natural. Contrary to the Enlightenment philosophers, Hobbes, Rousseau, they saw the state as like an unnatural leviathan, the monster that we create in order to survive in the state of nature. That's not the church's view at all. The church's view is that man is by nature a political animal. It's part of our human nature to gather together into cities and societies. It takes a village to raise a child. Yes, it takes a village to survive too. If you're just Swiss Family Robinsoning it, you're actually not going to live very well. And of course, like Swiss Family Robinson, the classic story, the family living alone on the island, like they experience that immediately. They can raise their kids, but then there's no way else for their kids to go and marry. So they very quickly run into the problem that a family on its own is insufficient. You also need other families living together in society. And so these are like both natural human institutions, which are both good. And of course, the church is kind of both of them, because the church perfects the wholeness of human nature, not just any one part of it. The church takes and elevates the entirety of our natures.
Mm-hmm. And what's interesting, once they would decide a new city in the Old Testament, it was basically 120 people.
Yep.
And that's the exact same number that was at Pentecost, that this new church, when the church was built, there was literally, it wasn't by accident, there was 120 people there in the upper room. Must have been Mark's mom must have been balling, because she had this huge house where you could have 120 people in the upper rooms. Like, I want to be invited to one of those parties. But I think that's an important thing to remember, that, yeah, we're made to be priest, prophet, and king, men and women.
Yep.
But those roles look way different.
Yep.
Like, my wife isn't a king; she would be a queen. But they have their same roles. It doesn't mean they're less in dignity, but the division of labor, the way that we do things. Now, obviously, some of it's negotiated and some of it's changed. We're not farming anymore. Like in the Bible, most of the time people were farming. They had to spend a lot more time just getting our basic needs. So yeah, there is some where obviously women are free to go out and work and do those things. No one's saying anything like that. But when it comes to how the house is led, it doesn't mean we're there to lord it over them, like you said. But when St. Paul's talking about that, how does he describe it? He says we are to die like Christ did for his church. We're supposed to die to ourselves. That's why we are like priests, the ministerial priests, that we give up sacrifices. We sacrifice ourselves for our job, for our family, for doing the things that I want to do, or buying the things that I want, so that my family can have it and be provided for. It's just a totally different understanding of sacrifice. Like women, they're superhumans to me. They grow people literally in their body and feed them with their body. Like, that's the design and the most beautiful part. That doesn't make them less than. To me, it makes them like superheroes. It's like, I cry at like every like little ache and pain. It's like what I see.
The most I complain about is I have to sleep on a pull-out hospital bed for a week.
But it's just different. God obviously designed that. But what I wanted to ask you about was I know Fulton Sheen would always talk about it, especially in the symbolism of a man versus woman versus the seed and that which receives the seed. And that's why the church is female. Can you talk a little bit about that symbolism and how that helps really drive home that point?
Yeah, this is really important. In order to understand the classic symbolism of male and female, we have to, of course, understand what the sexual act is and how it actually works, which we probably do in modern times. But like, the more and more homosexuality becomes a norm and sexuality is seen as fluid, actually we start not seeing these things anymore. But spiritually, like, because the way the sexual act works, the male is one seen as almost like the one who takes initiative, the one who's the active one. He has to start. He's the origin, the architect, so to speak, of the act. The woman is, of course, the receptive one, because she receives the seed and everything like that, and then nurtures and grows it within her own body. But also, like, the man's procreative act is kind of one and done. He does his one thing, and then procreation occurs almost like outside of his body. But the woman, she receives it, and then procreation occurs within her body. And John Paul will talk about the woman discovering the life within her. Because, of course, you don't know when the moment of conception is. Like we now know through modern science, it can be up to a week after the conjugal act. So it happens not when we're not aware exactly when it happens. You discover it within yourself, and so then the male becomes like a symbol or an icon of more like active, taking the one who takes initiative, the active initiator, and the woman like the receiver the receiver who then nurtures and takes care of things. And then based on basically just that, it's very clear you have to that starts enlightening why God is he, not she, why God is father, not mother. Because of course creation is the radical like activeness of God. He has to take the initiative to create and then also to save. If you start thinking of God in female terms, God is she, God is mother, you start confusing the radicality of God's gift of love to us and start thinking somehow God's responding to us when he saves us. You somehow are thinking God's responding to us when he creates us. But of course, this is nonsense. Then God becomes just another creature. So then that helps us understand too why when Christ came as a male. Because of course, like Paul teaches in Romans 5, God shows love for us, and that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. We were enemies of God, and Christ took the initiative to come save us and then turn us into his friends, as opposed to his enemies who were sinners. And so that's very much like the masculine thing. He has to go out himself, come down to us, condescend to our level, take the initiative, love us first. Of course, what John says, he loved us first. That's kind of like the symbolism of the male as opposed to the symbolism of the female. And so then the whole church, of course, is receptive of God's love. And so the church is feminine. We are the bride of Christ.
And there's so much in scripture about seeds and what that is. And what is a seed? A seed is the pattern which is in it, which it becomes. Like what's in the seed becomes a big tree. But Jesus is always using that, not just because they were agriculture, but he was showing a point. Like he came to spread the word, the seed. He came to do those things. Like the Bible's genius, the masculine's genius, but God is obviously way above us. And his ideas of how he set it up, it's not for us to try to question it and try to argue against it. It's like, this is the way that it is. This is how biology works. This is how, the seed works in general in any soil or the womb. This is just something that is. And I always found that interesting that, the church is mother. And what happens, she is there to receive, new people who are coming into it. And the priest is there giving us the word, the seed of God, the word of God, which is, there's all kinds of symbolism that we can use for that, which is just drives home that point.
Yeah, the kingdom of heaven is, of course, like the mustard seed, the tiniest seed that grows into a big tree. And of course, then but the the kingdom of God has to be preached to us. Faith comes to us heard, so like Paul says in Romans. And so someone has to be sent to preach. And of course, that's what the priest does. They come and they preach the gospel, the apostles preach, and then they bring us into, and then when we hear the preaching, we come into the sacramental life of the church, which is again being fed by God through the ministry of the apostles, the bishops, and priests.
I can imagine, and it's not a far-fetched imagining, that for some people who aren't familiar with this, and if you're just formed within the culture, you haven't heard anything like this before, this could be off-putting, to put it mild, right?
Oh, yeah.
But I like what you said there. The faith comes by preaching, right? We are meant to hear the word. And what does Christ tell us? Like the word is a sword. Paul says a double-edged sword. So it's not the things of faith and the things that Jesus has brought through his word and subsequently through the sacraments. There are things that sometimes we have to sit with and really just reflect on, wrestle with, because it's otherworldly, right? Yeah. So that's the first thought. Like if you're feeling, wow, this is completely foreign to what I feel or think or believe, well, take it to prayer. Like meditate with it, reflect on it. And it's not something that has just, come up in the last 5, 10, 15, 20 years. I mean, we talked about the doctors of the church. We're going back to Jesus himself and to St. Paul. I love in the Eastern Church, they've really preserved this idea of seed at Golgotha, like at Calvary. This idea of the blood and water that Jesus shed. It's this seed that's being implanted, and it's the growth of the church subsequent afterward. And so it's really ripe within the tradition of the church, in our icons, in our messages, that God's designs, they permeate not just the material, husband, wife, conjugal act, sexual act, bearing of children, it's also reflecting how God operates. It mirrors the designs of the spiritual life as well.
Yeah, yeah. If anything, I think it's almost the reverse. Like the way the order we find in creation, so that includes like the order of the sexes to each other, the way the conjugal act works, the way bearing children works. That is the way that is because of the way God is. So like God, the way God is, of course, is the primary first thing, and then that is reflected in the created order in this sexually differentiated mode. So of course, God is like not sex. He's not male or female. Now, of course, Christ is male, actually. So now God is male, but through the incarnation. But God in the Trinity himself isn't a father in the way we are fathered. Of course, our fatherhood is named after his fatherhood, is a reflection of that fatherhood. Now, motherhood is also a reflection of his fatherhood, but a different one. One that's actually like farther away from the fatherhood. That's why fatherhood is named after God's fatherhood. But God's is the origin from which we are. The created world is the reflection, actually, of the uncreated reality that is God himself.
Mm-hmm.
But I think you're also right. Like most modern people are going to be very disturbed or not like what we've been saying. And part of that is because like we're so confused about sexuality and gender today. We're so confused about it in every possible way, and so we just can't understand the tradition of the church in the classical world about these things.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think that's a big part that God really wants to preserve the seed. Like all throughout scripture, we see the sin of Onan is like one of the first seeds. When a man spills his seed, he literally drops dead. Like it's that serious of a thing. And we've taken sexuality to mean just, the part of just having fun. And we know it's for being procreative and to be unitive. And when we get away from the idea of what it is. So yeah, it doesn't even make sense to people. What do you mean seed? What do you mean receive? And it doesn't even make sense to them because they're so far removed from the actual reason why we have sex. It's not just to be baby factories. It's a covenant relationship within a man and a woman in a marriage, because there's a reason why all throughout scripture, one of the most ways that God talks about our relationship with him is in the idea of a marriage and what that looks like. And we aren't given to God. We're receiving whatever God's given us, his word, his spirit. We are receiving it. So that's how he's always talking about the bride and the bridegroom. And I think it's a beautiful image because it lets us know like how much I love my wife, but God loves me so much more that he wants to be in that spiritual union, that spiritual communion with me. There's nothing higher than even our, being intimate with our spouses. Like that's how much he loves us. That's how close he wants to be with us.
Yep. Even closer, of course. And just like in human marriage, the bride brings forth fruits like the child. And so when we receive God's love, then we're the ones who have to bring forth the fruit, which is to say like holiness, good works, evangelization. And that's almost like the spiritual the child, so to speak, of the spiritual life.
And it's the Trinity, right?
Yeah.
It's that love that overflows that became a person in the Holy Trinity. It's like it's everything's Trinitarian, and we will lose that part of it too. It can get really twisted.
Yep, for sure.
Which becoming a father, first becoming a husband and then becoming a father, you don't realize until you've gone through that, and if you've been blessed to do so, I would give everything, including my life, for my children. It just puts a completely different perspective on the obedience, the surrender, and the love that the son shows to the father, and knowing that he has to pass through this cross in order for the spirit to come and do what the spirit needs to do. This self-sacrificing love takes on a whole new dimension. Once, again, if we're blessed to do so, you're able to find, if you're a man, a wife, and then to have children with her, and then to see those children become who they are, and your willingness to just give yourself up for them. Again, it's Trinity through and through.
Yeah.
I'm thinking like we should have started the podcast with a little disclaimer here, because I'm about to go somewhere that we're still going to keep it Catholic here, Matthew. But I know some people listen to this with like kids around, so I know my wife does. So they're probably not ready for this part of the conversation. Yeah, you've mentioned the homosexual, like it's not. I don't know if it's a revolution or what. Just the scale at which it's being presented. Yeah, I mean it's everywhere. It's in front of you, and it's not even, it used to be a thing that was on TV, like it was a thing that was distant, but now it's personal.
Yeah.
I mean, I think everybody knows somebody who, right, um, lives that lifestyle. We're certainly seeing it in the church. There's divisions. Father James Martin, kind of proponent for, and then you've got people that want to lambast him. I mean, I don't agree with that, or you can be constructive or critical, what have you. Where do you think that's going, I guess? And how do we, I mean, are we just trying to continually swim upriver if we're trying to speak these values and these truths? Because I don't know, in the United States, just a year ago, like you would get canceled, they'd fire you, they this, that, and the other thing. I mean, in your reflections on it, let's just start there. Where do you think that's going? What do we do about it?
Yeah. Well, I think one thing to keep in mind, but also to highlight how this is a revolution. So the revolution is new, but there's also old stuff here. There's always been sins of sodomy. I mean, the word for it, sodomy, comes from a very Old Testament, time of Abraham, Sodom and Gomorrah. And of course, then St. Paul in Romans 1 talks about this as what happens when you embrace sin. Well, you go down the path of lust. Your lust turns unnatural, that men with men, women for women, and then you get social decay, all in Romans 1. So this has been around forever. This sin has been around forever. What's new about it, how it is revelation, is that we never had same-sex marriage before. Nobody in the ancient world, nobody until like 1960s, ever thought we're going to have a marriage to two men or a marriage of two women. And so even if it was like an ancient Greek world, it was widely accepted. Everybody practiced it. It's not Plato and Aristotle. They spoke against it, but everybody practiced it. But there was same-sex marriage was totally unheard of, because everybody knew, even if we're going to have your side attractions just for pleasure and fun, we still have an institution of marriage, and no, marriage is about procreation between one man and maybe a few women, depending on what pagan culture you're in. But then in Judaism, in the church, one man, one woman. Then, so there is both an old thing here and a new thing here. Where we're going, we're probably at some point going to go back to the old way, wherein lots of people are still doing this sin, but the idea of same-sex marriage will probably go away at some point. But it'll take 100 years for that to happen, because these things take time. But as we further and further separated sexuality from procreation, things have not gone well. There was in the first couple of generations of that, you could kind of live off your Christian past, like there's still some Christian values stuck in there. But now things are like sex and gender are so radically confused, and I don't think anybody in America thinks we're doing these things well. Anywhere you're at on the political spectrum, I don't think anybody thinks America is doing this well, in any way whatsoever. And so something's going to have to change. There's a phrase sometimes theologians will use: you bump into the res. The res, of course, just is Latin for thing. And this is kind of like a technical term for a reality check. If you sin, at some point nature hits back. Things don't work. This is why there are consequences of sins. Acts have consequences. Sins, bad acts, have bad consequences. And we're quickly getting to a point where there's so many bad consequences that we're going to have to, people are probably, in the next 50 to 100 years, going to be open to trying something new, which is trying something old again. Because even if we saw there's issues, there's going to be less issues than we have now. So at some point, I think this is already happening with the transgender stuff, especially with minors. Even like Europe is scaling all that back. So we're already seeing that.
And the rise of Islam is gonna definitely push that even farther.
Oh yeah.
Push back against it,
Yeah.
because they're very traditional when it comes to those kinds of things. But it seems that there's a weird alliance between the people who are pushing that and those who practice Islam. It seems like, how can they come together? But I
don't understand that. I don't think they know what they're doing.
Common enemy in Catholicism. Like seriously, it's common enemy in Christ.
In Catholicism, because I know I was thinking about it. It's just like, how they're just strange. We say strange bedfellows. Like how does they even come together? It's like it's like they'll kill you last. We know that the way that we're called to love them, even if people struggle with same-sex attraction, we're called to love them.
Yeah.
We pray for them. We're not throwing people off of roofs.
Yep.
We know that's it's part of the religion, and to act like that's not part of the culture in a lot of places where not everybody is radical. I'm not saying that, but if they say 10% is, that's a large number of people who are definitely want to take that to the extreme. I kind of wanted to dovetail a little bit, since we're talking about the homosexuality and how that kind of bumps up against nature. And this article that you wrote for Catholic Exchange is kind of another, depth into that about what's natural. We're talking about the marital embrace and what that looks like, and IVF, contraception, and surrogacy. We're seeing that is a big thing because we're talking about that with healthcare. Trump's been talking about it. A lot of people have put IVF on the map. Can you explain a little bit like what it is, what the church teaches, and if you can kind of give us a background before we get into the details? Because a lot of people, they'll hear it, they don't understand a lot of it, and then we'll unpack it as we go.
Yeah. So IVF, finally again, our topic for today, has a very good connection there. IVF stands for in vitro fertilization. What does that mean? That's Latin. Vitro is just Latin for glass, so it's in glass fertilization. Right. So this is getting to the idea where, as a cure for infertility, so you and your spouse can't have children because you're infertile, or maybe because you're both women or you're both men. What we have technology to do is we can take a sperm and an egg and put them together in a petri dish. So in glass, in vitro, and then the egg is fertilized. There's an embryo there, a unique human being with unique DNA, its own unique soul infused by God. But it's in the very first stages of its life. So this is in vitro fertilization. This is, of course, immoral. Nobody outside Catholicism really is going to be seeing that or saying something like that today. I've just been around for about 50 years. The first child created with IVF is like 51 years old now. There's some celebration about that recently. But ever since it started back in the 70s, the church has been clear this is immoral. Persons are supposed to be created in a personal way, not technical way. A human being who's created ultimately for love should be created by love, not by techne, not by skill in the laboratory. So IVF is immoral because it removes procreation out of sexuality entirely. When the way we're supposed to procreate according to our nature is by the sexual union of man and woman in marriage. And IVF totally bypasses that. It takes actually the parents out of the equation. And then procreation no longer results from an act of the parents, but from an act of a technician in the laboratory. It's immoral. The church is very clear about this forever. But there's also other reasons it's bad. As we start going down this.
Matthew, can we parse this a little bit? Because there was a lot that you just gave us there.
Oh, yeah.
So you're making the claim from the Catholic perspective, and it's authentic to it, that it's immoral. Why are we claiming that it's immoral? You said that you gave a little bit of why we would say it's immoral, because it takes place outside of the relationship between two persons.
Yeah.
But to play devil's advocate really poorly here for a second.
I'll do it very, very well.
Yeah. Could we say, with the progression of medical sciences and technologies, why are we saying this particular act is immoral? Why isn't something like, sorry about that. Why are we saying that something like a heart transplant or a valve transplant or fill in the blank, right? You're removing the natural process of a person's heart and you're swapping in mechanical parts in order to prolong their life. Why is one immoral and the other one isn't?
Yeah, so of course there are some medical acts the church thinks and deems are immoral besides this, of course. But one of the reasons is all those are actually medical acts. There is some defect in the human body that we're seeking to cure or replace the function of. Like a knee transplant, for example, we're going to take out your bones and put in a metal socket or something like that. Or a heart valve, we're going to put in a new valve into your heart or heart transplants. There's always some defect there. Now, IVF isn't a medical act, as in it doesn't actually cure anything. It's not trying to cure anything. There's no sense whatsoever in which IVF is curing anything. It's a response to a medical issue, infertility. Of course, that's how it's developed. In the case of a homosexual couple, that's not curing anything. That couple is naturally infertile, should be infertile. But IVF it's not a medical act in curing. It's a technology, vaguely medical, But it's a technology that's replacing the human mode of producing new humans with a different way of producing new humans. And so then that's why it's very different. I guess very different from other medical technologies. It's because it's really not a medical technology. Does that first distinction make sense?
Yeah. Can we just parse it like a little bit more too? Because I know there's going to be people here who are going to watch and listen to this, and maybe their child has been born from IVF, or they themselves have been. That doesn't mean that we think that they are intrinsically evil or there's issues with them. We're called to love them. And, that first and foremost, because I know people in my family and people in the parish and some people who out of ignorance, because the church hasn't taught this to them and they didn't know, or they weren't practicing and they were just desperate and they wanted to have a child, and God forgives them. Understandable. And that doesn't mean that they're like Frankenstein's monster or something like that. Okay. So let's start there. That they're
a person created with the same dignity that anyone else would be.
And they're to be loved. And God does, he does understand and forgive people for things. If you actually come and say, hey, what I did was wrong, I didn't know it, or I did know it and I didn't listen or whatever. So God does forgive those things, and we're to show dignity and to love and to respect. So first and foremost, that's a big deal, because what are the numbers? Do you know the numbers of how many children have been conceived via IVF?
In the United States, it's something like 7 million, I think. I could be wrong. I think it's like 7 million.
Significant
we're
number.
talking a lot of people. But let's get into some of the reasons why it's bad.
Yeah.
Like the process itself. Can you get a little bit into the weeds about what that's like and why all these controversies? Because I just saw an article, I don't know, it was from China, that they're going to have machine wombs.
I saw that article too. Yeah.
Yeah, I saw that come across my feed, and why wouldn't it? There's, we have the surrogate arguments.
Like something out of the Matrix.
Yeah, it's like a sci-fi movie, and like I said, I made that reference to Frankenstein, but that's exactly what Frankenstein's about: is playing God. And what ends up happening is a slippery slope. It starts with, this one thing, and then it goes and it goes and it goes, and it just can dovetail really fast. So can you get into a little bit about the ethics and what actually happens and why it's bad?
Yeah. So what happens in IVF is, first of all, of course, you need sperm and egg. So sperm usually are acquired through masturbation. So that's like the first step in there. There are moral ways to retrieve the sperm, but like nobody ever does those except for like a handful of Catholic people ever. And that's only for sake of like fertility testing. Very, very rare people actually do that. So first of all, like there's you acquire the sperm. They just acquire the eggs. Like the eggs from the woman. Those are much harder to acquire, actually. Like you can't just wish those out in any way whatsoever. So what they have to do is they have to, and of course you don't just get one. Usually, in a woman's cycle, she releases 1, maybe 2 eggs a month. But if you're going to do the process of IVF, we'll talk about this shortly. You're going to want more like a dozen or so eggs, 20 or 30, because you want likelihood of success, so you can sell your product and service well. If your product or service doesn't have a high success rate, nobody's going to buy it. So you want a high success rate, so you need a lot of eggs. And so you have to hyper-stimulate the woman so she releases like 30 or 40 eggs at once. And there's a variety of health complications at risk with that. So then you do that, and you collect the eggs and the sperm. And then what you have to do is, of course, you have to put them together. But the other issue here is usually when people are doing IVF, they want the best sperm and the best eggs. Because ordinarily, right, you have sex with your wife and then you get pregnant. Very few people actually will do something like find a stud. That's like a really rare thing. It's like usually if you procreate with your spouse, but if you're doing IVF, you can very easily just substitute somebody else's eggs or somebody else's sperm. And sometimes you have to actually. Sometimes your sperm or your eggs aren't good, don't really work very well, and so you can't obtain pregnancy, fertilization, and pregnancy with your sperm and your eggs. So you do have to substitute somebody else's sperm, somebody else's eggs. So at that point, then you're bringing in a third or maybe even a fourth party into your marriage to procreate, and then you end up like raising somebody else's kid and things like that. And so you might end up not having a biological relationship to your children at all. So that's another issue. Then, of course, like the technicians are going to the lab and fertilizing eggs with the sperm. And usually, right, because they want to have success, we're not going to do 1 or 2 at a time. We'll do 10 at a time. And so you're creating then 10 embryos, which is say 10 human beings in a test tube. And then, of course, what you do then is you're going to take these and implant them and put them into the woman's uterus, and hopefully some of them will implant into her uterus, which is to say attach themselves to the uterine wall, and the woman will become pregnant. But again, you don't just put in 1 at a time. You want success, you'll put 4, 5 in at a time. Naturally, what's the most number of children a woman can bear at one time?
I don't know. Wasn't there Octomom? Didn't she have 8
Yeah,
kids?
the world record is Octomom. In the 90s, a woman bore 8 children at once. But naturally, the most you can actually bear is 4. You can have quadruplets. 4 children at once is the most naturally. Octomom, the woman who gave birth to 8 children, of course, received IVF. And the common practice, and even today, is they'll create like a dozen embryos and put in anywhere from 3 to 10 into the uterus at once. Back in the 90s, when they weren't quite good at this, they'd casually put in 10 or 12 embryos from, say, human beings, and hopefully one would implant. And so if you did attain one pregnancy, well, you've created and killed 10 other kids. Nowadays, they're better at this, so they'll create 10 and implant 3 or 4, and hopefully like 1 or 2 will successfully be born. And so one of the issues with IVF is that like it doesn't work very well. And so for every single child that's successfully born and then raised from IVF, there's 3 to 10 dead kids that didn't make it in the process. So it's actually like a horribly gruesome activity. Like to create 1, you kill 4.
So when you say 7 million roughly people were born of IVF, then on average, 21 million
at least
embryos, were either frozen or discarded of, and in order to get to those 7.
Yeah, and sometimes in the process of IVF too, if you have like 3 or 4 embryos put into your uterus, and then maybe 2 or 3 of them successfully implant, now you're pregnant with twins or triplets. Of course, they're genetically different; they're not like genetically identical, so they're different. But so they're 2 at a time or 3 at a time. But maybe you only want 1, and so there's still a common practice in about 25 to 50% of IVF people actions have something like this, what's called selective embryo reduction, where you've successfully become pregnant with 2 or 3 embryos. You only want 1 kid. All right, so we'll wait for a couple weeks to the pregnancy is secure, and then we'll go in there and eliminate the other couple. So it's not even just like letting them die; it's intentionally aborting a couple of the children in your uterus. So the kid born from IVF might have like literally had a brother or sister killed right next to him in the womb. And it's also getting even worse now. Like about a year ago, an IVF clinic opened up in California, which is advertising they can give you the best possible. This we get into what the other issue with IVF is that you start getting designer babies. You start wanting to choose not just have a kid, but have a kid with blonde hair, blue eyes, who's also going to be a strong athlete and smart as well. So this California clinic is saying if you give us enough sperm and enough eggs, which say materials to create enough embryos, we can create 100, 200 embryos and genetically test them to find the smartest one. And so you give us 100 babies, we'll take the one, the highest that's going to have the highest IQ points and implant that one. So they're saying if you give us enough sperm, enough eggs, we can get you a kid that has 9 more IQ points than the average kid. So your kid will be smarter. And at that point, you're looking at carnage of 1 kid born for 100 kids killed, 100 brothers and sisters killed in the background of that one child. So like with this one,
or the opposite, they can test and see, make sure there's no defects at all, as far as, obviously Down syndrome, we know that but like whatever, any kind of genetic deform, any of those kinds of things that they're going to try to screen for that. We know where this leads to. That's what the issue is. Like, yes, it's bad in itself. We have this issue now with the frozen embryos, but we know what it's going to lead to because people always push and push and push and push. We don't ever stop. Yep. It will be this, like you said, like designer clones, this ideal person. You give them like, oh, hey, I want to order this kind of kid and I want it exactly to be this way versus, and we know that as playing God.
Yeah.
We are trying to say, God, get off of your throne. I'm on their throne. I'm going to tell you what I want and what I get. Mm-hmm. And, all stemming from this yearning that we see all throughout scripture of people wanting to have children.
Yeah.
Which is a
good thing.
A great thing. But we know what the church always says, and it's not always easy to hear, right? Well, what's the option? The option is to adopt. Mm-hmm. The option is to do that. And there's so many kids. I just had on Dr. Ray yesterday. Him and his wife couldn't get pregnant. He's adopted 10 children, all different races, different ages, and he gave them great lives. And as Catholics, if we are truly pro-life, like those lives matter just as much as those who are your own. And we need more people who are willing to do that. So imagine out of that 7 million people who were trying to do that, if only a quarter of them would have adopted the kids who are in foster homes or in adoption centers. And there's a lot of kids that need good parents who will love them. And I think just trying to bring that to the forefront, for trying to inspire people to have those great stories about how it can be successful, how you can really make a big impact in someone else's life and still be their mother or be their father, just because it's not biologically your kid.
Oh yeah, that's a great point. Like people, it's a really good thing to want to have a kid. Like this is a natural desire. It's good to have this. You should have this. A married couple should have this. And if you're suffering from infertility, that's of course a great cross to bear. But there are, like, adoption is a thing, and kids need to be adopted. Adoption is gonna be hard. But like just parenting is gonna be hard too, no matter what. No matter what you do, parenting is gonna be hard. That's I think like a secondary danger of this whole IVF process. When you go down this eugenic route where I want to try and design the baby, I want a strong kid, an athletic kid, a smart kid. Even if you get like the best possible chances of that, kids have their own personalities. If you haven't noticed, you can't really predict what the personality of the kid's going to be like. You can't predict what they're going to like. If a kid is like genetically disposed or gifted in athletics, he might just be a bookworm. And that's part of like the excitement of parenting is like, who are my kids going to be? I don't know. I'm going to love them no matter what, though. And so,
you mentioned it. The Catholic Church is the one who's been standing strong against this, because we know, like I said, if we just view life this way, the opposite is also true. We see right now the biggest scourge in our planet is assisted suicide. In Canada right now, it's like the number one reason for death. And in Illinois, they just passed assisted suicide. And we know where this started. This started by the eugenics movement in Nazi Germany. And it started by, before they were killing Jews, they were killing people in the hospitals who were a burden, who were suffering or whatever excuse. And then it turns into someone who's got mental disabilities. Now in Canada, you can get assisted suicide because you got financial troubles. Like we always push it to the extreme. And the way that we view life affects not just IVF, not just abortion, but it also affects end of life care. We're called to be pro-life from the womb to the tomb, right? And sometimes it's not easy and it's not pretty, but we're called to be faithful. We're called to trust God. We didn't make these things up. God revealed those to us because there is a sanctity to life. And when we try to play God, it's always going to go bad. Always.
Oftentimes we won't see it at first. Like the first people to advocate for physician-assisted suicide were like maybe genuinely compassionate at heart. They just saw people suffering from tremendous sicknesses, who were like, a lot of us could kind of like in a moment of weakness, like I get why you'd want to die in that situation. And the first people to do IVF, like it was originally just couples who were crying because they couldn't have children. All they wanted was a child. Maybe they couldn't afford to adopt. And so IVF seemed like a really good thing. But of course, the sinful people that we are, we're going to take this thing and ruin it. We're going to start expanding physician suicide from like grave cases of severe pain to like depression and then PTSD. Financial struggles, and of course, the next step is going to be like forced euthanasia against people's will. That's going to be the next case. Where I think the doctor thinks you should die, so we're going to kill you. Instead of it's not even going to be a suicide; it's going to be just murder at that point. And IVF went the same way.
They're already taking organs from those people.
Yep.
You don't think that's not going to get pushed harder when people can make money about it and save their own life, like so that they can die, so I can live? Of course, that's going to happen.
For your average couple, they're not thinking in these terms, though, right?
Yep, not at all.
It's fun for us to talk about them and
theologically,
to project where we see it going with credibility and a high degree of certitude. I mean, we could see where the road's going to lead if people continue to develop this technology, especially in societies that don't have a strong Christian foundation. But for your average couple that's struggling with infertility, which is on the rise, it comes again from this genuine, truly holy desire to want to have children. That's a wonderful thing. To say that we're going to surrender this desire and pursue it on our own outside of what God would like us to do, that's a toxic, false sense of compassion. And it takes the courage and boldness of our faith in those tough times to say, Lord, I trust you.
Mm-hmm.
I choose you. What do you want for me and for my husband, my wife? Is a family in the cards for us? And if so, what does that look like? That's a really hard thing to wrestle with, but it's one worth wrestling with.
Oh yeah, like the way you start your family is going to be radically important because it's going to set the tone for the whole rest of your family life. And so if you're starting a family in an immoral way, in a way contrary to God's law, you're not going to probably do family life well. Probably when you start approaching the creation of the family through and what I really just focused on your own desires, even if they are good, noble desires, if you start trying to meet those desires in the wrong way, the rest of family life is going to quickly, the way you raise kids then is going to quickly go off track because there's this mentality, there's fundamental mentality shift that's guiding our decisions that's misled. That's not focused on accepting reality as God made it and gave it to us, and then working within His law, but imposing my own will, even contrary to His law. That's going to start showing up in other areas of life too. But especially with infertility, there's a lot of hope here. About 90% of infertility is curable, which is to say, it can be cured. Then you can attain pregnancy naturally through conjugal act with your spouse. If there's
a lot of it is diet. They're finding out that's a big part
diet, lifestyle.
Yeah. There's a lot of issues, and let's just be honest that women are trying later.
Yep.
That's like go to college, find yourself, do a career. The average woman over 30, like 50% will never conceive. But it's like we know after 30, it just really exponentially gets harder. Yeah. There's a reason why that window has always been, our parents and grandparents, and that's what they did. Not because we want to keep women in the kitchen or anything like that. It's just the way that God designed the bodies. It gets harder, and we know that is such a cross for women. So if you're hearing this, we're not judging you. Mm-hmm. We want to love you. But a lot of people just don't know. So this is a way to get the education out there. So now you know. So now you if you do something like that,
and you could look further into it.
You could look further into it. But a lot of people, like I know a couple that they didn't know. Yeah. They didn't know that this was against church teaching, and they love their child, and he's healthy, and everything's great, and that's good. And they love them, and their marriage is fine, and they don't have any other issues. They didn't go down some slippery slope because we know what sin is. Sin, you have to know that it's a sin, right? Mm-hmm. So I just think that there's not really anybody talking about this.
Yeah.
We've heard a little bit with, because it's so expensive that Kennedy and Trump and those guys started bringing it up to pay for it. And then the controversy started. And like I said, the article about the Chinese wombs and, we see where some of this stuff can go. But I think it's important to have these difficult conversations.
Yeah. On a positive note, you're right. There are a lot of things that have yet to make it into mainstream. And on the topic of IVF, there are natural procreation technologies that the church does support and encourage people to use. Likewise, contraception, that is something, and women are starting on it as girls. I mean, it's like it's getting pushed even further and further back. You'd never hear they're using it for things off label. I mean, as teenagers and younger, contraceptive medicines. So it's like, well, that's also contributing to this issue. But the church then also supports, right, natural family plan, natural ways to, if you are in a relationship, manage your fertility, plan, hopefully not with a contraceptive mentality, but plan your family.
Yeah.
And so those are some of the things that need to be spoken out and into people as well.
Yeah, for sure. The church, of course, has always been a great supporter of family life and of large families. Even Vatican II praises large families, and John Paul II was big about this throughout his pontificates. So usually the average Catholic actually thinks IVF is good because it's more babies. It's a way to create children and have more kids when you couldn't otherwise. So it seems like a good thing. It's certainly, for the average person, the intent, what they're trying to attain, their goal in mind, is good. But morality is not, what's good and bad is not just intentions, clearly. There's like 1,000 movies about this, right? Like, I had good intentions, so I went and killed 1,000 people. That's bad. And so, of course, like the means you choose to pursue your ends, your goals, also matter. And so the church is saying this one means of IVF isn't a good means to attain the end, the goal of procreation. There are other means, though, which for 90% of people will work. Can work if you give it time and money. But also, like IVF also takes time and money. Usually you need 2 to 3 rounds, which cost $30,000 a piece for it to work. And so IVF also, it can drain your bank account and take a long time to be successful. And healing your body. The physical toll, especially on the woman, right, of doing the various rounds of hyperstimulating her ovaries so there's a much greater a burden on the woman as well. And then of course, like this act of implanting the embryos into her are also like invasive too, right? They have to go up into her uterus. So that's a
It's
toll as well.
it's tragic. I mean, I didn't come across this until I started looking into what the church says, and as far as morals go, and what is morals, the right and wrong of what we do.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, very simple definition there. But prior to that, I had no idea. I mean, I was a pre-med student before I went into seminary, and you're getting fed through that culture and through that echo chamber of what is right and what is real and what's practical, and so yeah, it's okay to contracept, and here are all the benefits of contraception. Now we're learning that it's not actually so good for you, and there's downsides to it, and there's cancer risks and scares. I want to just share from my own perspective, and this goes to the men for sure, but to the women, I love the fact that my wife can just listen to the natural rhythms of her body. And off of that, we can decide whether or not we're going to engage in relations, whether or not we're ready to start a family. You don't need a pill. Like, you don't need a patch. You don't need an implant. You don't need, again, God's designed you with beauty, intelligence, and goodness. You're able to just take a look at the rhythms of your body and make those judgments for yourself. I also love that, hey, my wife's not ready to go anytime I want to go. You have to exercise.
There's a fasting.
There's a fasting that takes place. And you know what? Sometimes it's frustrating. We said disclaimer. Sometimes it's frustrating.
Yes, like, you're so irresistible that you lost all this weight. Your wife's got to be like,
tell me about it. I'm clean shaven too. It's like, you have to respect that. No, now is not the time. Right? St. Paul says it's not good for married couples to abstain, but when they do, for prayer and fasting.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it deepens our relationship. Like, I can't emphasize that enough. As a husband to my wife, it deepens our relationship when there are times we can't be that way towards each other. It makes those times we can all the more special.
Yeah. And there's a difference between longing and lusting after your wife.
That's right.
I've had to learn that as coming in as a Catholic. I didn't know that you can even lust after your wife.
Yep.
But I think that like you're saying, those cycles of abstaining and enjoying, it's like you literally long for each other. You miss each other. Like, if it's just like, that's why the beauty of the Catholic Church is the liturgical seasons. It's like, okay, we have fasting, we have feasting. There's a reason why we do that, and there's a genius in it. And I just really appreciate your takes today, from the genius of masculinity and the fatherhood to helping shed some light here on IVF. Khalil, did you have any other questions? Do we have our
I don't have rapid fires for today.
I know. It was like, we're gonna do some we usually do rapid fire questions. I'm like, oh yeah. So like, it's kind of weird in that topic. But if we would have got into the masculinity stuff, but
we got to have, if Matthew wants to come back on, we'd love to have you back on.
Oh, I'd love to be back. It'd be great.
Stuff. Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah. So where can people see some of your work? We have this article. We'll link this article from Catholic Exchange on IVF. Your dissertation, you just defended it. Eventually, you're going to get it published. Where are some ways? You said you're not really on social media. How can people follow your work?
I write for Catholic Exchange probably every month or so. That's the only commonplace right now. Yeah, I'm not on any social media. Everyone always says, well, I do have a LinkedIn now. I made a LinkedIn like a month ago, so you can find
anybody looking for a PhD professor. What is your background? What's your ideal job? If you were going to apply for a teaching position, what would the ideal job look like?
Oh, like a small Catholic liberal arts school or a Catholic seminary. I wrote on the priesthood, so it'd be great for seminarians, or a good Catholic high school. Yeah, I'm a really good teacher. I love teaching. Love connecting with students. Yeah.
What would you want to teach if you had your choice of any subject or any discipline? What would you want to teach in the faith?
Well, I'd love to teach theology, especially moral theology, but of course I can also do literature and philosophy things as well. So kind of wide range there.
Well, we're just outside of my alma mater, Mundelein Seminary. So,
oh yeah, they're great there.
Yeah, they're great there.
Well, thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Purposely Catholic. If you found this challenging, that's good. Pray about it. If you yourself know somebody who is IVF, used IVF, love them anyways. We're called to love. So don't take this personally. God has put this episode on our heart. We thank Matthew for his time. But if you did get and learn something from this episode, please hit that subscribe button. It helps us get this light of our faith out to more people, because nobody gets to heaven on accident. We are trying to live purposely alive. God bless you and have a beautiful day.